Hey everyone, welcome back to session 4 of the Debate Hub. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the art of refutation as well as the rebuttal speeches in public forum debate.
Last lesson, you learned about the three components of any complete argument. Here's a quick refresher. What is the first component of a complete argument? Take your time and pause this video. If you ended up getting D, uniqueness, you are correct. The three key components of any argument in order are uniqueness, link, and then impact.
Let's get straight into the lesson. Contrary to the constructive speech, or the first two speeches where you construct the arguments that support your side, the rebuttal speech, as the name suggests, is used to refute the arguments that your opponents have previously presented. Given that if you're the first rebuttal, you've only been able to hear the other side's constructive speech, your sole task is to refute that constructive speech. If you're the second rebuttal, however, your responsibility is not only to attack your opponent's case, it's also to defend your own case from the attacks that have been made in the first rebuttal. This process is called frontlining. Ideally, frontlining is done first and takes around 1 minute 30 seconds to 2 minutes, leaving the rest of the roughly 2 minutes you have in the rebuttal speech to refute your opponent's case. Just as a quick side note, in a lot of files related to debate, you'll see the terminology AT, and just know that stands for answer to, as in answering an opponent's argument. So Sam, what are the ways in which I can refute someone's arguments?
So in session 3, we learned about all three parts of a complete argument. Once again, it's uniqueness, link, and impact. Get that into your head. Successful rebuttals target the weakest element in each argument. So let's start at the top from uniqueness.
First way to answer uniqueness is by making an argument called the non-unique. This response says that their impacts are already being solved for, thus they're not unique. For example, if the resolution was that the United States federal government should hypothetically increase the number of jobs some way or another, for example, creating a jobs program, a non-unique argument would say that creating this job program is unnecessary because Biden just invested billions of dollars into another similar job program which would solve the impact.
The second argument you can make towards uniqueness is causes. Other factors will cause their impacts and they can't prevent it. You might see this deployed against an argument that advocates for policy because it claims to solve climate change, for example. For instance, the US should implement a carbon tax on the energy sector. At first, that might seem to be able to solve climate change, but what about the manufacturing, transportation, and agriculture industries where the carbon tax isn't applied? Even more so, what about the some 190 other countries that will still emit at a large scale, even if you solve US emissions and take that out of the equation? In other words, the opponent's link can only resolve a small portion of uniqueness. Said otherwise, it can only put a scratch on an existing problem that uniqueness identifies, and as a result, they can't solve their impact.
Next, let's learn how to attack an argument's link. The first way to attack an argument's link is by saying no link. This response is really the simplest of all responses in debate. Your opponent says that passing X policy has Y effect. You just say, no, it doesn't have that Y effect for Z reason. Going back to the carbon tax example, a no link could say that a carbon tax would be ineffective at changing the behavior of large corporations because the tax is simply too small, so it would be simply ignored by these trillion-dollar corporations.
The next argument you can make is a link turn. Link turns are the most potent tool in a rebuttal's arsenal. Simply put, a link turn states that voting for your opponents does the exact opposite of what they claim. If a carbon tax is hypothetically good because it causes companies to reduce greenhouse gas intensive procedures, a link turn would argue that in fact it would increase it. Companies may offshore to other countries without stringent regulations that have even less oversights and environmental protections.
Finally, Sam, how do you respond to the impact of an argument?
Well, the first way that you can respond to an argument's impact is by using impact defense. You can think of impact defense as a no link except on the impact level. It's analogous to a minor car crash. The impact has occurred, but the bump is small and everyone will make it out safely, except for maybe a small increase in your insurance costs. From an outsider's perspective, the most unintuitive and unexpected part of national circuit public forum debates is the impact. Nuclear war, climate change, out of control AI are all commonplace because the larger your impact, the more important your argument is. We'll discuss that in session 5 when we do a deep dive into weighing. But before that, impact defense fundamentally questions these ludicrous claims, and it does so by leveraging intuition and empirics. Nuclear miscalculation, for instance, where a world leader launches a nuke out of fear, is not uncommon in PF by any means, but it's absolutely crazy if we think about it. Using empirics, it hasn't happened for nearly a century, despite the Cuban Missile Crisis, confrontations between North and South Korea, and so on. Using intuition, the reason this is true is because nuclear weapons are an option of last resort. Before even thinking of ever pressing the nuclear button, politicians will attempt diplomacy. They'll ring each other up on hotlines and so on, everything in an effort to prevent full-scale nuclear conflagration.
There's a second, less intuitive way to respond to an impact scenario. Remember what we said when we said in session 1 that debate is a unique activity because anything that your opponent doesn't respond to is taken as truth for the rest of the round. The impact turn strategy takes advantage of this exact concept. It basically just says, well, the opponent's impact happening is a good thing because the opponent's impact is a good thing. For example, if the pro side says that passing a resolution is good because it solves climate change and prevents it from killing millions in the future, the con side would stand up and say, actually, it's bad to solve climate change because climate change is a good thing and has many beneficial effects. Obviously, this is pretty crazy, but many teams apply this to all types of impact scenarios, saying economic decline is good, nuclear war is good, terrorism is good, etc. We won't get into the specific impact turn arguments that are made and exist because, well, that's a whole nother kind of worms for another video. A caveat we want you to know, though, however, is that you really do need a good judge if you want to execute this impact turn strategy. PF has a large assortment of judges, from expert judges to even your local parent, and obviously your typical parent won't agree that nuclear war is a good thing. It's also important to remember that if you read impact turns, you cannot read link turns, otherwise you would quote double turn yourself. Let's go back to the nuclear war example. If you read a link turn saying that voting for you prevents nuclear war, but you also read an impact turn saying that nuclear war is a good thing, then your opponent can just concede both and say, we agree that nuclear war happening is a good thing, but my opponent prevents it from happening, which is the link turn, and thus you should vote for us. I also want to note, it's not that all impact turns precisely are crazy. A good example of a realistic impact turn is about sanctions. One side says that, well, placing sanctions on authoritarian regimes is a good thing because it coerces those regimes to the diplomacy table so they can decrease their human rights abuses. The other side could read impact turns to putting on sanctions on authoritarian regimes, saying that sanctions are a bad thing because they kill thousands of civilians in the process and cause authoritarian leaders to do even worse things, such as trading on the black market to get their new sources of revenue. So now that we know all the ways you can respond to someone's case, how would the other side defend their own case against these responses, Sam?
So in this case, the process you'd probably want to use is called frontlining. At its most bare bones, frontlining is a response to defend your own case. Whenever you frontline, you want to keep in mind some of these critical tips and tricks. It's probably become obvious to you by now, but debate is its own game, and in many ways, it's pretty counterintuitive. Arguments that you miss are taken as truth, and often they lose rounds. Therefore, you must take notes, or as debaters call it, flow diligently at all times to ensure that you never miss any arguments. Moreover, we recommend keeping an organized format. So this consists of they say, then their response, followed by but, and then your response to their response or your frontline. So for instance, they say a carbon tax is ineffective because companies can just avoid it. But our evidence suggests that it's worked in dozens of European countries where businesses have changed their practices. Moreover, you want to know how to allocate your time efficiently to the best responses. So usually this consists of spending more time on offensive arguments like link turns or impact turns, which they can later weigh and leverage rather than defensive arguments, and also acknowledging that some arguments are just better than others. Obviously, this will come with time and experience. Moreover, like you just saw I did, Many cases will see both sides have logical, rational propositions. So the only way to deadlock break is by using empirics, statistics, or explaining why your author is more qualified than theirs. To say, even if they're also logical and perhaps rational, our statistics are empirics and our authors say otherwise. Thank you so much for attending session 4 of the Debate Hub. We hope you take something away from it, and we hope to see you at session 5, which is probably the most important lesson about the back half and weighing.
Thank you so much.